There we are. Yeah, good morning over there and good evening from here.
Yeah, good evening there. So as you can see, we are here today at COEX, which is a conference facility. This is our last day of the Global Forum, but I think this is a really special one, the only video conference organized by students from 3 different universities. Well, we agreed on our schedule, and according to our schedule, you are supposed to open this video conference. So would you like to go first?
We'd be happy to do that. I will just say a couple quick words of introduction. And Dean Kim, would you like to say something further before we get going here?
Oh, about the procedure. Okay. We have 3 teams here, and we have an expert commentator, Dr. Hanifa Matsui, who wrote a call for proposal for us back again last year. And then, as discussed, the American team goes first, and then we'll follow up with first discussion from Dr. Hanifa Matsui, and then presentation of Gyeonggi and Ritsumeikan groups.
That sounds very good. So we're ready to go here, and I will introduce our students here shortly. But I want to thank you, first of all, very much for making it possible for our students to join you. This has been an incredibly fascinating enterprise for us, and as best we can tell, it is probably the most innovative set of discussions on this issue of the kind that's ever happened. As you mentioned, Young, one of the things that is the case is we have students from 3 different universities simultaneously involved in a conversation about what is arguably the most important issue facing the planet. Innovative in the sense of the nature of the conversation that's going on, innovative because of the technology that we're using, both in terms of our conversation here today, but also in terms of our ongoing collaboration since January, as we've been working across the continents to engage in this discussion on climate change. It's been innovative in the sense of the student-to-student dialogue that we've been able to engage in, as everyone has come to the website to exchange ideas. And innovative now, I think, in terms of the ideas that the students have put together, both in assessing the current state of climate change, but also in helping to form what we hope will be some innovative strategies that can be used by the United Nations as the nations convene in Copenhagen for the next round of climate change negotiations. So when we talk about innovation, it's hard to touch that many bases all at the same time. But thanks to especially you, Dean Kim, and our colleagues, both at Gyeonggi University and Ritsumeikan University, we're able to engage in what I'm sure will be a fascinating evening for us and morning for you. So thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this session.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you, Don, for your leadership. This was your idea. When we met back in 2008, you proposed this, innovative course project together with Marnie. And we entered this, very enjoyable cooperation. And so far, I am very much satisfied with, the whole course project, as well as, students here and there, their performance, participation of students from Ritsumeikan. Well, if I may, I would like to share briefly history of or background of this course project, at least background of this course project from my standpoint. Very briefly, allow me to briefly go through this short history. I think this course project originates in 2005 when we signed an MOU with Penn. And then we agreed to organize a special summer program named Penn Gyeonggi Collaborative. 2006, about 300 international students gathered here on our campus. And I remember we had about 10 UPenn faculty members. 2007, in the second Penn Gyeonggi Collaborative program, we had about 500 students. And the most special event in 2007 was what we named Dean's Meeting. Then, you know, 5 deans or 5 representatives from UN, UPenn, Moscow State, Peking, and Ritsumeikan came to Gyeonggi to talk about further developing global collaboration among you know, the 5 institutions. And we at that time we named this global collaborative. In 2008, we changed the name of our summer program to Global Collaborative Summer Program. So we expanded the summer program into a truly global one by inviting, you know, UN, again, Russian National University, Peking University, Ritsumeikan, as well as Penn. And then we met, Don, and you proposed this regular semester course project. And then we moved a step further, and now it became a regular semester program trilaterally organized by Gyeonggi, Penn, and Ritsumeikan. I have 3 rather specific proposals to make. Well, think about it, please. First, I really hope to make this course project regular one. Preferably once a year, we can design a online global collaborative course such as this. Second, I propose to publish the students' paper into a book. Gyeonggi Press is willing to publish students' papers into a monograph. And if interested, Penn Press can, you know, join us. Third, well, again, I would like to invite your students to this year's Global Collaborative Summer Program. I'm in charge of this summer program, and I can assure you that, you know, I'll treat you, students from UPenn, just like Gyeonggi students. For example, I'll charge you Gyeonggi student tuition or Gyeonggi student rate, and it's less than 1/4 of international tuition. So that's my second or third proposal. So I really would like you to think about my proposals, and we'll keep in touch about these concrete proposals. Thank you. Can you proceed? And I think Dr. Chung will chair the here, but you will chair there about your students' participation, right? Students' presentation.
That's right.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Young, and we really appreciate your invitations. I know that we're going to be following up on each of those. We have 2 sets of student papers that we're going to be sharing with you very soon in the next day or so. One is a series of short summaries, and then a set of much longer presentations that the students have put together in writing, and we'll be sharing that with you within the next day. So we'll get that to you, and then we can move forward to that publication plan in particular as the first and immediate step to be able to follow through on the things that you've outlined for us. So, Young, thank you very much. Appreciate that very much. And I will now turn the floor here over to our students who have their presentation to make.
In the United States, there has been a fundamental shift in the perception of climate change since the Kyoto round of negotiations. 4 important factors have fallen into place that make American support in Copenhagen this December a very real possibility. First, social awareness of climate change among the general population is far greater than in the late 90s and early 2000s. The catastrophic effects of extreme weather events, such as Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, the wildfires plaguing California, and persistent droughts in the South, have prompted many everyday Americans to acknowledge that climate change may play a role in these disasters. Second, the economic consequences of ignoring climate change have caught the American public's attention as well. In addition to costs associated with extreme weather damage, consumers have been hit hard by the extremely volatile prices of oil and other fossil fuels. This was particularly evident during last summer's oil price shocks, during which gasoline skyrocketed to over $4 a gallon, prices unseen in the United States up to that point. These types of economic incentives simply did not exist a decade ago. Today, green reform is not seen as burdensome as it was in the past. Instead, many Americans believe going green is the key to lasting recovery and growth following the current financial crisis. Third, the science behind global warming has made significant progress. In addition, the technology to implement green reforms to reduce human impact on the environment has improved as well. This can be seen by the proliferation of hybrid cars, the installations of reliable, renewable energy sources, and America's commitment to overhaul its power grid to be cleaner and more efficient. 10 years ago, the science behind climate change was not as certain, and the tools to address the problem were not as practical as they are today. Lastly, the political climate in the United States has transformed since Kyoto. President Obama has changed the White House's rhetoric and plans regarding climate change dramatically. The next step for him will be to convince Congress to act swiftly on green policy. President Obama committed himself to reform how the United States addresses climate change during his campaign. Thus far, he appears intent upon fulfilling his promise. The confluence of these four factors, social, economic, technological, and political, signal that the United States desires to join other countries as a responsible partner in global climate policy reform. The United States' critical contribution to this partnership will not be what Washington mandates, however, but what the innovative American people create to make green policy the norm rather than the exception. When American ambition and civic engagement combine with similar forces from other nations at the forefront of green reform, the daunting consequences of climate change will soon yield to the remarkable promise that a global partnership will hold, beginning with the upcoming meetings in Copenhagen. With these developments in mind, our class embarked upon our project, From Red Light to Green Light, which we are excited to share with you today. Red light issues highlight what went wrong with Kyoto and how we can avoid similar pitfalls in Copenhagen. Yellow light issues are critical transition points. These are hurdles we must overcome. Green light issues are examples of policies already implemented, as well as those that need to become a reality that will ensure successful, lasting green reform.
Good morning. The course that we have been engaged in brings together two different initiatives, a local, national agenda and an international agenda. Together we have outlined a plan to get from detrimental energy use to international cooperation and sustainability, from red light to green light. Our immediate initiative involves Penn students framing a global agenda for climate change policy. Under the steering and direction of the Penn School of Liberal and Professional Studies, we were able to create a website for the class. The website provides an open learning commons, a platform for collaborative study of environmental global sustainability, in which we as a class have written blogs and engaged in creating an interest in and strategy for developing multilateral climate change policy. Our broader initiative involves bringing together disparate groups of academics and environmental activists alike in a multimedia, multinational forum for debate. These debates focus on the pressing environmental issues, providing real-time access to course lectures and discussions as they unfold. The discussion attempts to disseminate ideas about how to mitigate climate change in the form of two broad questions. The first is, what kind of global strategy makes the most sense? And the second is, how can individual countries agree to pursue such global policies? To answer these questions, we are joined by hundreds of members sharing ideas through discussion boards, blog posts, and videos on the course website. The discussions, posts, and blogs serve as catalysts for the creation of a new generation of policy, a policy in which we're all engaged and connected.
Now, the first aspect of this red light, green light project is, in fact, the red light. And we should talk about three different parts of our research. Number one is what went wrong with Kyoto. Why did the United States not get on board? And to a lesser extent, China, why they didn't get on board. Secondly, what obstacles still exist for Copenhagen and in the United States. And third, what could happen in both the United States and abroad if a comprehensive climate change policy is not passed in Copenhagen and later ratified by the United States. So,
one of the major shortcomings of the Kyoto Protocol was its failure to set binding emissions targets for the world's largest emitters, particularly in the case of the United States and China. Under the protocol, industrialized nations included in Annex 1 have binding emission reductions targets for the period of 2008 and 2012. At the time, China, still in the process of industrializing, was not considered an Annex 1 country. As a result, even though President Clinton signed the Kyoto Protocol, there was a broad domestic opposition to the implementation of any international agreements that would economically disadvantage the United States. The Byrd-Hagel resolution passed unanimously by the U.S. Senate invalidated the implementation of the Kyoto Protocol. In order to set effective long-term goals in the reduction of greenhouse gases, the Copenhagen negotiations must effectively incorporate the United States and China, currently the world's largest emitters, to binding reduction targets.
now, one of the key problems why the United States did not ratify Kyoto in '97 was that there were weak economic incentives for the United States. The first part of this is that there were concerns about American job losses. Going green makes companies incur very high fixed costs, and the fact that China and other countries were not on board necessarily, the United States thought that it would not be economically prudent to incur these fixed costs and maintain a lower scale on the international market. However, now there is more investment and more capital in green energy and green jobs that will not lose jobs in the United States, but will actually help us create jobs in the future. Secondly, in the last decade, there's been more private sector investment in green energy and green business, which again can also help create jobs right here at home. Secondly, energy is very different now than it was more than a decade ago. Obviously, today there's less oil in the world than there was when Kyoto was signed. And as James talked about earlier, the 2008 oil spike showed us how the prices are very volatile and how the prices can go up and down very quickly. The American people have finally recognized that going green is a necessity and that reducing our dependence on foreign oil is the only way to become an economically and energy independent nation, and that hopefully Copenhagen we can make an agreement that will help get us there next year.
The institutional arrangements that Kyoto set up were not flexible enough to account for changes in the status quo over time. To begin with, since the protocol was ratified, the rise of rapidly industrialized countries has increased their share of greenhouse gas emissions in ways that would have been difficult to predict in 1997. Future agreements that set long-term benchmarks need to be supple enough to reflect the potential economic changes developing countries will experience in the coming decades. In addition, different regions of the world will be affected to varying degrees by the unpredictable effects of global warming. As a result, future regulations should take these regional specificities into consideration. Another criticism of the Kyoto Protocol is that it has failed to fully integrate developed countries into negotiations. Developing countries were exempt from binding emission standards and were therefore effectively excluded from Annex 1 country negotiations. However, even though less developed countries are not historically responsible for global warming, they will suffer disproportionate consequences. As a result, many developing nations will have a harder time funding adaptation and mitigation strategies and will require significant additional assistance from industrialized countries. For Copenhagen to succeed, negotiations should set an agenda that effectively incorporate developing nations in framing international strategies in mitigating climate change.
A final reason that the United States and the world must get on board with climate change is for threats to independence and the safety and security of the United States, both home and abroad. The first is that while there is no direct evidence to link increased severe weather patterns with climate change, there is enough evidence that shows climate change does affect these. That being Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Rita, as James mentioned, caused millions of dollars in damage in the United States and created hundreds of thousands of climate change refugees. In addition, there are current water shortages in Israel and in Darfur. And as climate change gets worse, this can only make these water shortages worse. The conflict in the Middle East and the war in Darfur, water can become a political issue, and people can withhold water for political means. Furthermore, the 2004 tsunami in Indonesia was an example of how underdeveloped countries are wholly unprepared for the awesome task of redeveloping a country after a natural disaster. In fact, the United States, after the tsunami, sent in 15,000 troops, 24 Navy ships, and over 100 aircraft to help the Indonesian government pass out food and water to prevent their population from becoming radicalized. It's possible that without the United States' help, their country could have become radicalized, and that led to political extremism and terrorism. It is very important that there is the necessary precautions taken to prevent political extremism and terrorism from happening as a result of climate change. In addition, the United States also has to reduce its dependence on foreign oil. We send over $700 billion a year to OPEC countries, including Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, and it's possible that these dollars are getting to the hands of terrorists who want to do harm to the United States and our allies throughout the world. So in order to make the United States more safe and more secure, it's imperative that we reduce our dependence on foreign oil in the next in the coming years.
In conclusion, there's been a shift in the way that people view issues related to climate change since Kyoto. However, in moving forward, the Copenhagen negotiations should address and reconcile the shortcomings involved in past agreements.
The concept of yellow light includes several issues where progress has been made. From our research and our papers, we have identified these areas of potential success and the roadblocks to that success. In the United States, with the election of President Barack Obama, many of these roadblocks were removed at the presidential level. However, it will require more than that to advance these yellow light issues.
The election of Barack Obama was a great leap forward for America's involvement, both domestically and internationally, in environmental issues. In his first 100 days, he has articulated a progressive environmental agenda, and he has outlined a number of programs in which he hopes to see success. However, there is a process that he needs to follow for these programs to be implemented. For instance, one of our classmates researched the movement towards making new buildings environmentally friendly while retrofitting old buildings with energy-saving technologies. One of the key issues holding back a green building boom is the lack of a government mandate or regulation. Now, while President Obama may support this and similar programs, for any action to occur, he needs the support of Congress and the people. It's not a one-man government, and for any progress to be made on these yellow light issues, we need the full weight of America's people and government behind these programs. Obama's role in the international arena has been to increase America's involvement in the global solution. One of these key solutions is having developed nations provide aid to underdeveloped nations.
While proper monetary aid will alleviate many problems, aid in the form of technology for clean energy sources will provide a long-term solution. Innovation needs to happen in the developed world first. The answer lies in greater production of renewable, clean, and cheap sources of energy. Progress has been made. Alternative energies are becoming more and more popular, and success with renewable energy has been achieved, notably in the European Union and in many other parts of the world. But it is widely recognized that the technologies that we have today are not going to be sufficient to properly mitigate climate change. We need stronger government action to promote and fund research and development for better technologies. We also need laws and regulations that spur the private sector and consumers to adopt these technologies over traditional, non-renewable, dirty, but cheap sources. Scientists in America and across the world must be working on innovative technologies, and they need the government to aid in their efforts and eventually spread these developments around the world in an international effort to turn the tide on climate change.
What we want you to take away from our yellow light slide is the understanding that key issues like aid, technology, domestic and international political realities all remain in transition, ahead of where they were years ago, but not yet to the point where they're maximizing their impact. These are going to be among the most crucial points in determining the future success of global climate change policy.
So the question remains, if we can take the intermediary steps, what will America look like in a green light era? And this question will remain unanswered unless, first and foremost, our government succeeds in enacting policies, which will change America's currently dirty lifestyle. It is our hope that a change in outlook and philosophy from the top down will lead to a positive cycle, in which American citizens will start to force the hand of government to continue to enact more far-reaching policies and allow for a transition to a green economy in America. But in order for this to happen, Americans, regular citizens and legislators, must first be convinced that a transition is not a detriment, but an opportunity. One way to show this is tangible success. For example, in the Pacific Northwest, for decades, the timber industry has been a very profitable one. Yet this industry comes with the destruction of millions of trees. As I'm sure you all know, deforestation can add a just as damaging effect to global warming and the environment as the emission of fossil fuels. Due to a $500 million appropriation in the American Recovery Act in January, conventional loggers have been able to transition to green logging. Instead of cutting down trees, they are now cutting down brush and bark, which mitigates the chances of a forest fire as well as can be used as an input for biofuels. Not only has this policy helped decrease America's carbon footprint, but it has created jobs in the green industry. Although stimulus is a good first step, it is essential that the American government puts a price on carbon. Americans must understand that in doing so, there will be widespread positive effect on the economy. An economy-wide policy will compel businesses to change their behavior. It will lead to more innovation and create new industries and new jobs. In the long run, it will allow green technologies such as alternative energies to become competitive with conventional sources of electricity and even stimulate worldwide competition in green industry. We are adamant in our claim that creating green industry in America will not only benefit our fellow countrymen, but will allow us to re-emerge as a world leader abroad. Other nations have already had success in this transition. For instance, Denmark has put a price on carbon and through policy has allowed wind energy to flourish. The industry has created 20,000 new jobs, now has 38% of the world market share in wind energy turbines, and the nation is now completely energy independent. It is our hope that by looking at this issue from a new angle, we will be able to convince Americans to get involved in the fight. One innovative way that we have seen that we can do this is through the creation of a green corps, in which Americans can be a face to our leadership abroad by getting involved with the fight and doing green projects in developing nations. Furthermore, if we can get Americans on board with cap and trade and alternative energy policies, alternative energy production, the government will be forced to change their philosophy on climate change, and our civic engagement project will have succeeded in doing its job.
There are many examples of successful state and local policies that not only battle climate change, but also engage the public. One such example is decoupling utilities in California. Most utilities' profit increases as energy use increases. However, in the process called decoupling, the state subsidizes utilities that lower energy usage. They do this by covering the cost and expected profit margin over actual revenues. To fund this, the state increases utility rates by a very small fraction. At the same time, the utility company urges the public to lower usage, either by cutting demand or creating energy from alternative sources. In fact, some households can sell excess energy from a turbine or solar panel located on their property back to the utility. It is not surprising that the state of California, after decoupling utility rates in 1982, has embraced adopting higher climate standards since then. While it's hard to quantify this, policies such as decoupling lead to the public's awareness and eventual acceptance of becoming more sustainable. Here in Philadelphia, which is home to the tallest green building in the United States, the Comcast Center, Mayor Michael Nutter recently launched an ambitious plan to make our city the greenest in America by 2015. This strategy, called GreenWorks Philadelphia, combines many existing policies with new and innovative goals, stemming from 5 crucial E's: energy, environment, engagement, economy, and equity. Included in the plan is a replacement of the city's wire trash bins with solar panel trash compactors, called the Big Belly. The Big Belly is actually the microcosm of sustainability. Harnessing the sun to power the compactor, these bins require less trash pickups a week. The streets department will be able to allocate most workers assigned to pickups to other jobs. Moreover, the bins have a wireless device that alerts the city when the trash can is full. This means that workers do not have to drive around looking for full trash cans. Combined with less pickups a week, the city fleet's emissions will be reduced. In addition, as you can see, the bins feature recycling cans on either side. People will be able to dispose paper and plastic into recycling streams instead of sending them to the dump. The Big Belly effectively engages citizens by raising their awareness of recycling. On top of all of this, since the bins are closed, trash will not blow all over the street. In the last few weeks, the University of Pennsylvania has installed 10 Big Bellies on campus, such as the one in the picture above. As Nathan alluded to, government action is needed to convert Americans into sustainable citizens. For example, without stricter building codes, developers and architects will not design efficient homes and offices. Once the government enacts policy changes, the light will switch from red to green in America.
We have already talked a bit about the Green Light initiatives, or the what that will be necessary to curb climate change, and now Dan and I will begin to discuss the who, the governance structures responsible for these changes. Within the United States, action must be taken on all levels. In terms of regulations and mandates, certain jurisdictions reside among different levels of local, state, and national government. Therefore, these respective bodies will be responsible for carrying out different Green Light initiatives. For example, as David previously mentioned, states are responsible for updating and strengthening building codes. Hence, state governments have the power to enact mandates that will ultimately drive sustainable development and construction. At the national level, the federal government has the power to set standards and regulations that all states, industries, and citizens must adhere to. These national standards can be applied to a number of sectors, including limits on industrial pollution or deforestation. Or taking cues from the California model, the federal government could increase efficiency standards for cars in order to transform national car manufacturing. Although regulations will be necessary in moving Green Light initiatives forward, the greatest power of the federal government lies in the ability to recalibrate the markets through appropriate taxes and subsidies. Unfortunately, the market cannot be solely relied on to curb greenhouse gas emissions, and thus governments with the ability to underwrite the market must step in to ensure that the right incentives are in place. While the Obama administration has instituted incentive-based programs, such as tax credits for solar panel installation, these initiatives are likely to prove insufficient without the elimination of certain activities and commodities currently being subsidized and supported by the federal government. For example, deriving more energy from renewable sources will only be economically viable if subsidies for fossil-based energy sources are also eliminated. The same will be true in green agriculture, transportation, urban planning, and construction, all sectors in which taxes and subsidies play a critical role. The federal government has the power to spur the transition to a sustainable market for green sectors, create the right conditions conducive to green growth, and ultimately guide the institutionalization of environmentally conscious living and development.
While state-level action will be critical in combating climate change, the scale of the problem necessitates individual agency and global coordination. Individually, the norms that govern the relationship between people and nature must change. No longer can we just value the nature as natural resources to be harvested. We have to see it as something with intrinsic value. Moreover, as the general sentiment shifts towards green, governments will be forced to follow suit, codifying environmentally friendly regulations. Luckily, it seems this change is underway. In the last 3 years, America has seen a dramatic shift, from not supporting government action to having climate change a key part of President Obama's administration. Similar paradigm shifts are happening worldwide, and governments are taking note. The problem must also be confronted by international coordination. Climate change is a global problem, and it therefore must be responded to by everyone. As Caroline mentioned, the domestic markets are underwritten by government. Similarly, global markets are underwritten and supported by treaties and institutions. Institutional coordination is reducing and eliminating subsidies for non-sustainable industries is essential to promote investment in green sectors. If certain countries abstain, this would limit the effectiveness of any state action and de-incentivize investment and innovation. The game changer in this regard is the creation of international institutions that has the strength to enforce compliance. Such institutions are already under discussion at the recent Bali talks, and an effective and powerful treaty will lay the foundation for success to prevent climate change. Thank you.
Although we framed the issue from the United States position and directed our funding towards United States policy, we acknowledge that climate change is a global issue. Climate change knows no man-made borders, and we must address it collaboratively. Our class's unique format combines in-class lectures and discussions with online interaction from around the world. This particular structure demonstrates the benefits of both domestic and international collaboration. The combination of students from different backgrounds and academic expertise broadens the windows through which we look at climate change. This serves as our primary example of how civic engagement can act as a tool for solving the world's growing environmental concerns. Not only does civic engagement facilitate international cooperation, but international cooperation in turn facilitates solutions. As Laura mentioned in the red light section of our presentation, the U.S. and China's refusal to comply with carbon reductions marks one of the major failures of Kyoto. However, as mentioned on a yellow light slide, both countries have begun to establish civil societal forums to work together to address environmental challenges. For example, both countries have established an exchange to combat the growing problem in both countries, accessibility to clean water. In addition to solving environmental issues through public means, this bilateral citizen cooperation could inspire their counterpart governments to do the same.
Throughout our presentation, we use the traffic light symbol to illustrate the shift in the world's climate change course. A red light means halt. These are the policies of the past that hindered climate change, or these are the conditions that hindered climate change policies, allowing more and more greenhouse gases to pass into the environment as many of us sat by and watched. A yellow light signifies the hope that will potentially allow us to proceed forward. Yet, we still proceed with caution, aware of the indefinite circumstances that could place us in yet another red light. The green light represents the policy and institutional changes that have addressed climate change in the past and will enable successfully addressing climate change in the future. Fortunately, individuals have the power to take the switch of a stoplight from red or yellow to green, not only in our figurative symbol, but throughout the world. As Dave mentioned earlier, Philadelphia has been installing solar panel trash compactors and recycling bins throughout the city. If citizens can encourage their local governments to do the same, not only will we be reducing trash through recycling, but also reducing climate change emissions that actually come from the trash compactors and the transportation of the trash from the compactors. This is a prime example of a way in which citizens can engage locally to ensure the efficiency of their community.
As the climate change crisis becomes more ominous with each additional ton of greenhouse gas emitted, we must act quickly to avert catastrophe. This action will rely on innovation and change, as the solution requires a complete reformulation of the interaction between man and his environment. Part of that solution must involve the voice of the new generation and the participation of persons on an individual level. The opportunity can be seized through the energy and dedication of civic engagement, inspiring stewardship and cooperation in the fight for the survival of our planet. Climate change is the defining issue of the new generation, and we are ready to engage. As mentioned in the green light section of our presentation, we believe that this energy can be harnessed in a global green core with the mandate to be the bridge between the developed and developing world, assisting in the transfer of intellectual aid and in adaptation efforts. Climate change is a problem that requires unique solutions to unique issues. As such, while economic cooperation, domestic reformulation, and international negotiation is essential at the state level, we must go beyond state lines to provide a universal solution through our individual efforts to solve this grave problem. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much. We'll take a moment for our students just to take their seats back here. Thank you very much for your attention. And in addition to that, let me just, as they're sitting down, underline the 3 big points that I think lie at the core of what they were talking about. First is just how much the climate change issue has changed in the United States in the last decade from Kyoto, now preparing for Copenhagen. The second thing is the foundation of civic engagement as a driving force in the effort to try to change not only policy, but also to develop new technologies and to build the political support to make it possible. And the third is a set of specific policy initiatives that the students have outlined to go from red light to green light. That constitutes the core of this. So we appreciate the opportunity to make this presentation. Look forward to the chance to discuss the students' findings as well as the findings of the students who are going to be presenting there shortly.